Right, Sunday leisure time, and we're joined as usual when we're going to talk tech and gaming by the associate editor of Stuff magazine, Nick Cowan. Nick, I'm blaming Chris Gibbons for this entire thing because it all started on Monday this week where he decided to talk about the cannabis industry, and we got into talking about drugs, and then we got into talking about the legal aspect of drugs. Just as a matter of interest, drugs in games. How often do we see them?
Um, in terms of the narcotics you're talking about, and I'm assuming you're talking about illicit narcotics, and just on a personal note, stay in school, kids. You see them, I wouldn't say fairly frequently, but they do make an appearance in some games. For example, um, you know, in an open world shooter like Far Cry, for example, the player is encouraged to pick up, shall we say, certain herbal power-ups, which could be construed as drugs, I suppose. They do everything from, allow you to hold your breath longer underwater and run faster through the wilderness. Fallout, for example, has narcotics in it called Buff Out, which are a series of pills that you can take, which gift you the ability to be stronger for short periods of time. The funny thing about Fallout is that it actually takes it quite seriously, because if you take too much Buff Out, you can actually become addicted, and and then you go through withdrawal. I would say, they have made an appearance as kind of as peripheral items in the Grand Theft Auto series. But the funny thing about drugs in games is that they're always kind of viewed as a bad thing. They're either being used to do bad things, or they're being used by bad people, or bad people are running them. So, yeah, they do pop up occasionally. But off the top of my head, I can't really think of a drug dealing game where you play the drug dealer per se.
What is the relationship then with games and drugs in games?
I'd say the relationship is less about, say, for example, the evils of drugs, in that, although, like I said, if someone is dealing drugs, or somebody is dependent on drugs, they're generally looked at as a shady individual. It's kind of interesting when you consider how left-wing a lot of the gaming industry is, that drugs are still treated quite as they would be from the point of view of a conservative. So yeah, they're like I said, they're very, very much looked like as a bad thing, in terms of how you come across them and how you use them, and certainly the people involved in dealing them. I mean, I've lost count of the number of games that I've played where the enemy is an evil drug cartel, for example.
So there are no drug dealing games at all.
Like I said, off the top of my head, I don't know. I mean, I might be missing out on an app here or two that you could sideload. But yeah, as far as I know, the only game that I can think of where, narcotics was something that you had to peddle was Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars, which was essentially a game on the handheld Nintendo DS. It all depends, I suppose, on how lateral you're prepared to think. And once again, I'm not saying that this is what the developers intended, but you could make the argument at a stretch that the power pills that Pac-Man gobbles up in order to become superpowered could be construed as narcotics. And of course, Mario takes mushrooms, which makes him bigger and bigger. And like I said, I want to be very, very clear so no one gets sued. I'm sure that that's not what the developers intended us to look at them. I'm just thinking that if I was a student and writing a paper on the use of drugs in games, those are two pieces of low-hanging fruit I may go for, obviously with the caveats I've just mentioned.
Yeah, I suppose as with any game, there are all sorts of perceptions which are brought into play by the individual who's playing that particular game as well.
Indeed. Indeed, but in most of the times in adult games, if narcotics do make an appearance, you usually get a warning about it. In much the same way, if, for example, when you turn on a film or a television show on Netflix or Amazon Prime or DSTV, you get a warning at the beginning that says, you know, there's sex in this film and violence and foul language and the use of narcotics. So be warned, if this is not the entertainment for you, maybe watch, I don't know, Peppa Pig or something.
Okay, nice to catch up with you again, Nick. Have a good week. We'll chat next Sunday again. Cheers, mate.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Associate Editor of Stuff Magazine, Nick Cowan. Just having a look at drugs in games. And quite nice to hear that it isn't a big factor in the gaming industry and in games that are being distributed. That's it from this sector of Mansfield today. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time. Same place. Cheers.